It would have been interesting to see if they would have explored a trade down. If there was a team that really badly wanted to get one of those two centers, had they landed one or two and, been able to move back one spot and pick up something in the process. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of what they need, certainly they're controlling the board, assuming that the top two picks are both centers. I think it's fairly safe the way that things have landed. I don't see the Lakers taking a point guard, so in that case they've got their pick between Russell and Moutier.
Of those two, kind of break it down for us. The guy that you like, the better fit for Philadelphia. There's a lot of debate. A lot of people like Russell, and obviously they've seen more of him. Moutier playing in the Chinese Basketball Association. We were kind of debating, is it better competition in the Big Ten or college basketball or the Chinese Basketball League? Who got better competition? Who's a better, more ready guy for the NBA in Philadelphia?
I think probably Big Ten is a slightly higher level of competition. It's really interesting. The Chinese Basketball Association is basically unlike any other league in the world because, the best players there, the imports from the U.S., tend to be pretty good caliber players. There's guys, we've seen Will Bynum in this year's playoffs and Lester Hudson both play roles off the bench for teams, and they were playing in China against Emmanuel Moutier and guys like that just a couple months ago. So there is that quality, but then when you get beneath them, because each team only has two imports, the domestic Chinese players are not as high caliber, I think, generally as guys you're facing in the Big Ten. To me, the big thing in terms of readiness from last season is that Moutier only played 400 minutes because of injuries, whereas Russell had a full season game in, game out.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, too. As you mentioned, the Chinese league, he only played, 12, 15 games over there because of the injury. And you wonder, is that something that is going to make him fall a little bit? Our team's going to kind of back off of him because they didn't get to see him enough.
Yeah, I think that certainly someone like Philadelphia has done their homework and was prepared for this. It was a little difficult because if you had a trip planned, it's obviously not easy to get to China, both diplomatically and in terms of just sheer logistics. So if you had your trip planned in December and he comes down injured in November and suddenly isn't playing, then maybe you miss that opportunity. But one of the nice things is it's not like this is the first time that Moutier had played against high-level competition. You've also got the experience of scouting him last year in the American high school games, the Nike Hoop Summit, and things like that, where that also provided a base. And then you'll get a chance to see these guys work out individually, surely, as well.
What are some of the pluses in mind? Russell, obviously, it sounds like a guy who could shoot, needs some work on defense. On the other side, you got Moutier, who's maybe not a great shooter, but pretty good defender, got a really good first step. I mean, what are some of the concerns you might have about these guys in the pro game?
It's a little harder for me to speak conclusively about Moutier because I've only seen him play the one time in the Nike Hoop Summit, which was one of these showcase games that he played in last year, and then also looking at his stats. But, I think kind of a classic power point guard in the mold of a lot of the guys who have played for John Calipari, kind of Tyreek Evans. Derrick Rose is a bit much to put on him, but in that style of player who's very good at getting to the basket, his low free throw percentage is a bit of a concern. I think if you project him to shoot a lot of free throws, and then also as you project him developing as a three-point shooter, that's a bit of a concern. But very good at getting to the basket. Russell is probably the more complete player. I mean, a guy who played off the ball in college. I think most people at this point assume that he's going to end up as a point guard in the pros because he's just so good with the ball in his hands. Great court vision. He's got the ability, I think, to play with and without the ball. That's what allowed him to play shooting guard in college because of the fact that he can shoot it. But ultimately, it's kind of like James Harden, where it's a waste if you're playing him and he doesn't have the ball in his hands.
What about Winslow? I mean, he seems like the wild card here, and maybe some of the European players. I know Porzingis is another guy that some people said could jump into the top 5, if not maybe the top 3. Do you see a Winslow or a Porzingis or any other player being able to work their way into the top 3? And maybe knowing Sam Hinkie, would you be surprised if he went and maybe a little surprise route?
I don't know. Would we be surprised if he went to the surprise round? I guess nothing that the Sixers do can be too surprising at this point. But when you look at their needs, I mean, Porzingis, I think, is a very talented player. I'm coming out tomorrow with my final draft board, and he actually moved all the way up to third overall on that board behind Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, who's number one. So, he's got the talent there. But in terms of need, you're already looking at how can we play Nerlens Noel together with Joel Embiid when he gets back healthy. You've got Dario Saric coming over at some point. And, Porzingis projects as another front court player, so that'd be a bit surprising. Winslow is another guy who could fill a role for the Sixers, but, you've seen them bring in a lot of guys to try to sort of develop, one of these toolsy, long, athletic small forwards. If we can teach them how to shoot and create another Kawhi Leonard basically in the lab, I think that's kind of their project. So I don't know if I see them using a high pick on a guy like that. I think they'd rather, take their shots with someone like a Jeremy Grant later on.
Your favorite, Towns seems to be the number one guy. Who is the guy for you? Who is your second best player in this draft?
It would be Russell. I mean, he actually comes out number one going strictly by the numbers. It's not a big difference from Towns. And, when you consider some of the defensive elements that Towns brings that aren't entirely captured by his block rate, to me, he's the number one guy. But Russell is a really good prospect. I mean, he reminds me a lot of watching James Harden at the same age. That's a lot to put on a guy. I don't know that he's going to be second in MVP voting at some point down the road, but that's the kind of tools he has.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people around this area anyway, you either like Russell a lot because of the shooting ability that he brings, then the Ohio State kind of slips into the subconscious of the Sixer fans, and you wonder if the athletic ability and the Evan Turner word comes out there and you get a little concerned. But I think he's a better prospect coming out than Turner was, correct?
Certainly. You look at Turner was doing this as a junior, and one of the things that I found in my research is performance, a couple years down the road, back early in your college career actually tends to project at least as well or even better what you're going to be in the NBA. And, Russell, if you compare him to where Turner was as a freshman, it's not particularly close. And then I think the other thing is, Turner's always struggled during his career with he has to have the ball in his hands, and he's not quite good enough necessarily to justify having the ball in his hands on a good team like when he played for the Pacers. Or even, the Celtics when he's playing alongside Isaiah Thomas. I don't think that's going to be an issue with Russell. That you're drafting him to put the ball in his hands.
All right, Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, and, of course, the NBA draft June 25th. The Sixers with Embiid and Noel, and they'll now have the third pick in this particular draft. What is the third piece that fits best to complete it all with those two players?
I think it's Russell.
I think
they landed in the in the right spot. That really makes a lot of sense for them to get him, and I think that's very exciting when you put him with those front court guys, Robert Covington, and then eventually filling in with all these other draft picks.
We'll see, and hopefully he could shoot the ball at this level. That would be an exciting combination with Embiid, and then a guy who can actually shoot from the outside would be a nice piece to add to any team. We'll see how it all goes down. Kevin, playoff games continuing tonight. The NBA Eastern Conference tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Always a pleasure, Kevin. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks for having me back on.